Taking time for your local news week in review here on AM 960 KLTF. A decision from the Department of Homeland Security received December 29th by Governor Mark Dayton's office means Minnesota will be the only state in the nation that has driver's licenses issued by the federal government and that lacks permission to work on the issue in the future. As a result, federal agencies may not accept Minnesota driver's licenses and identification cards for official purposes. Sometime this year, going through security at airports will be listed among those official purposes. The exact date for that requirement is unclear, and the federal government has promised that it will give states at least 120 days advance notice. Most states already issue Real ID compliant licenses. Last month, Governor Dayton asked the federal government to extend the Real ID deadline with his personal commitment that he would work on it. The commitment was not enough for the Department of Homeland Security. According to the letter from the federal government, Minnesota has, quote, had not provided adequate justification for continued noncompliance with Real ID standards. No charges will be filed against a security officer at the St. Cloud Hospital after a patient he used a taser on died. The security officer used a taser on Danny Hammond after Hammond had taken a gun away from Aiken County Sheriff's Deputy Steven Sandberg and fatally shot him with it on October 18th. Hammond was at the hospital for treatment of a drug overdose and attempted suicide in Aiken County. He was facing charges of terrorizing his wife and was being monitored by the deputy. The Stearns County Attorney's Office has completed its investigation into the matter and has concluded that the security officer's use of force during the incident was reasonable and authorized, and therefore no charges will be filed. New Minnesota laws that went into effect yesterday include regulations on conducting elections in a time of emergency, additional qualifying conditions for medical marijuana, and motor vehicle registration updates. Over the summer, a task force was formed to come up with recommendations on how elections will be handled in case of an emergency prior to Election Day. A bill provides direction on potential emergency scenarios that could impact elections, including determining who has authority to address an emergency situation, what the costs would be of disrupting elections due to an emergency, ballot security during an event, continuity of operations procedures and defining communication procedures and key emergency contacts. Intraceable or chronic pain was also addressed and added to the list of qualifying medical conditions for the use of medical cannabis in December after a public hearing. The Commissioner of Health is required to report findings to the Task Force on Medical Cannabis Therapeutic Research on the need for adding intraceable pain to the list of qualifying conditions. Beginning yesterday, every owner applying for a motor vehicle or motorcycle registration or transfer of ownership must provide proof that the vehicle is covered by an insurance policy. Required information includes the insurance company's name, policy number, and policy expiration date. The Minnesota Supreme Court will not hear the appeal of a prison inmate who beat and kicked a fellow inmate nearly to death in 2012 at the St. Cloud Prison. 33-year-old Leonard Fisherman was convicted of first-degree assault in Sherburne County District Court. Fisherman appealed his conviction to the State Court of Appeals, arguing that he is a sovereign citizen and therefore exempt from the criminal laws of Minnesota, and that the prosecutor improperly told the jury that he had previously killed someone. Fisherman also argued that the judge presiding at his trial should have ordered a mental competency examination for him before the trial. The Court of Appeals ruled that his arguments ranged from baseless to unconvincing as it affirmed his conviction. Fisherman then appealed to the Minnesota Supreme Court, which Wednesday refused to hear his case. Fisherman was in prison for raping a 15-year-old girl at knife point in 2011 in Itasca County. He is serving a 30-year prison sentence and was at the Minnesota Correctional Facility at St. Cloud in 2012 when the assault against the inmate happened. That's the latest from the newsroom. I'm Scott Colomb.